Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this, which is the third of the Black Lives Matters events being organised by Kingston Racing Equalities Council and the Royal Borough of Kingston. My name is Andrew Besant. I'm going to be one of the two co-chairs of this event, along with Councillor Sushila Abraham, who is the Deputy Mayor. My role at CREC is as a trustee and a board member, and I also chair the CREC Race Equality Subcommittee. I'm just going to sort of briefly do a bit of introduction as to why we're doing these events, how CREC and RBK are linked, what we're going to discuss, and why these issues are relevant to everyone in Kingston. So bear with me while I just run through that. So why are we doing this event? Well, obviously this year a number of issues, including the murder of George Floyd in America, caused a lot of discontent amongst the Black, Asian, minority ethnic communities. This resulted in a lot of demonstrations under the banner of Black Lives Matters. There was also as a result of Black communities feeling they'd received disproportionate attention from police forces around the UK, and issues such as racial profiling and stop and search were being misused against them. RBK felt a strong need to take action to support the BAME communities, and after discussion issued a joint statement between CREC and RBK indicating that the two organisations wanted to demonstrate that racism and discrimination were not acceptable anywhere in the world, and especially not in Kingston. RBK worked with CREC and became the first, and we think possibly the only, local authority to fly a Black Lives Matters flag on top of the Guildhall. We went further by taking a Black Lives Matters motion to full council on 7th of July this year as evidence of its commitment to anti-racism and support for the BAME communities. CREC and RBK have a long history of working and collaborating together. The most successful of all these collaborations is probably Kingston Carnival, which sadly wasn't able to happen this year, which celebrates the diversity, culture and inclusivity which we share and promote what is good about this Royal Borough. RBK supports CREC in many ways, but strategically, CREC is the only Race and Equalities Council in South London and is one of the very few in the UK. In the past, every local authority had its own Race and Equalities Council, but funding cuts from central government have meant that a lot of them have closed. As I said, this is the third in a series of race equality, Black Lives Matters events that we're organising through to December. We've identified a number of areas that we want to discuss with residents, and tonight, with help from some of our partners, we're going to have a look at racial equality in relation to young people and older people. We will look at other areas when we come to other events, and there's one planned for December on the topic of disability and gender, and there may be some others next year. These issues are relevant and important because we don't know, for example, whether there is racism in the organisations which exist in Kingston. For example, how many BAME staff do the council have, how many Kingston Police have, Kingston Hospital, and how many do Kingston University employ. I think probably that's a fairly full introduction. So I'm going to hand over now to Deputy Mayor, Councillor Sushila Abraham, who will obviously introduce herself and say a few words as well. Sushila.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much, Andrew. I would like to thank CREC for organising this third event on race equality on younger and older people, and inviting me to co-chair this meeting with Andrew Besant. I am a councillor for Berrylands Ward and the Deputy Mayor of Kingston. I have been a local solicitor for almost 30 years, and my practice is on the Yule Road in Surbiton. I am also the council member for the Law Society of England and Wales, representing Surrey solicitors. A bit of my background: I was a past president of the Surrey Law Society and also was a past chair of the Solicitors Sole Practitioners Group, and was the first person of ethnic origin to hold these positions. What I hope to convey to all of you this evening is to strive and not allow race, colour, faith or gender to stop any one of you from aspiring to attain what you want to achieve. This evening, we have our panel members, Helen Coombs, who is the RBK Strategic Lead, Hamid Malik, Member of Kingston Youth Parliament, Shane Brennan, CEO from Staywell, Sergeant Graham White, Police Officer for Kingston Youth Engagement Team, and Ali for Kingston University. I would ask our panel members to introduce themselves and say a few words as to why they agreed to sit on this panel and their connection with the issues we will be discussing this evening. I will start with Hamid Malik. Would you be able to say a few words, Mr. Malik?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me here. And I'm Hamad. I'm a 17-year-old student myself, studying A-levels, and I'm the elected member of Youth Parliament for Kingston. I recently led on developing the Youth Office Student Survey and have represented young people across a variety of platforms, whether that's in council events such as the recent climate emergency or the National UK Youth Parliament event and conference. As a member of the BA-ME community myself, I've had to overcome several challenges and have personally been subject to racial verbal abuse, which makes this issue an incredibly passionate one for me.
Thank you, Mr. Malik. Could I ask Shane Brennan to say a few words, please?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shane Brennan. I'm the Chief Executive of Staywell. Staywell is a local charity which works with and supports older people here on Kingston-on-Thames. I'm partaking in this forum because I think it's really important that all organisations make a real effort to make sure all what they do, all the services they provide are inclusive as possible and actually make deliberate changes that actually go out actively make a difference in terms of the communities.
Thank you very much. Helen Coombs.
Good evening and thank you for the introduction. My name's Helen Coombs and I'm the Strategic Commissioning Lead for the Royal Borough of Kingston Council. So in a more layperson's words, essentially, I'm responsible for helping buy all of the services and making sure the quality of services for people through adult social care. It's a real privilege to be here this evening. By background, I'm a social worker. Spent many years as a mental health social worker. And of course, right at the heart of social work is the promotion of social justice, and particularly around anti-discriminatory practice, which is was really the heart of when I trained, where we should be focusing some of our practice. So it's lovely to be here this evening. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much. Graham White, please.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm a police sergeant at Kingston. I run the youth engagement team. We coordinate police presence in schools in Kingston. We run the police cadets and work with young offenders. This sort of discussion is key to the success of my team. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment in the schools, speaking to young people and understanding what are the problems of young people in Kingston and how they perceive the police and how we can change and improve to better meet their needs.
Thank you very much. And Ali Orr.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. My role at the university is I lead the careers and employability team. We support all of our students to fulfil their potential, and obviously it's a privilege to hold that role at an institution like Kingston, which has almost 20% of students from a Black background and over 50% of students from a Black, Asian, minority ethnic background. So it's a very diverse institution. I think our diversity and our inclusivity is our strength. It's incredibly important that we enable all of our students to fulfill their potential.
Thank you very much, Ms. Shaw. I would just give a quick overview of why RBA took Black Lives Matter motion forward. As all of you are aware, the Race Relations Act of 1965 was the first legislation in the United Kingdom to address racial discrimination, and thereafter it led to the 1976 Act and the Equalities Act of 2010. A great amount of work was done over the years by organizations like CREC to tackle equality in the borough. Unfortunately, racism and inequality still exist in many parts of the society we live in today. With the tragic death of George Floyd in the USA, this has woken up the world as a whole to the continued inequality faced by so many even today in this modern world we live in. We live in a global society, and during the COVID pandemic, we have seen how many people have come together and many people have continued to suffer all over the world, irrespective of their nationality, color, race, or faith. We must not allow racism to become a pandemic. And I hope we can all come together to solve the underlying issues of racism. We are proud as a borough in Kingston to be the first local authority to propose a motion to full council on the 7th of July 2020 to look into the issues raised by the Black Lives Matter. The motion before council proposed 6 items. 1, lobbying the government on inequality in health and education. 2, supporting the Black Lives Matter campaign by working with minority groups to listen to their concerns, working with the police on stop and search incidents, working with the BAME staff across the council on equality issues, working with communities to review the appropriateness of artifacts, working with CREC to facilitate events. CREC has helped in organizing events, and tonight's meeting is a third of those events. We are committed to continue as a council to carry out the motion that was before council. We need to tackle and stamp out inequality amongst BAME residents. We also need to continue to work to protect those who work in our hospitals, as we have seen several frontline BAME staff taking ill or losing their lives due to COVID. We must continue to support our residents and how they can access the support, whether it is mental health or anything else. I will now turn to the questions that we have received from the public, and we are hoping to cover most of the questions in tonight's discussion. There were 2 open questions, and I will read out the questions, and hopefully anyone from the panel would be able to give us their views. I shall ask one of you all to do that. The first question is, how important is the support of BAME communities for both its older and younger generations? I'll ask Ali whether you would like to start first on this.
Thank you. So obviously it's an imperative that we have support from the community for both the older and younger generations. You know, that's a given, and it needs to be very much part of our community cohesion, that we're able to support the most vulnerable within our community. So that's something that is absolutely essential, and I'll come back in a little bit later to talk about some of the ways that we are working with the community, if that would be helpful, through the university.
Thank you. Hamid Malik, would you like to come in on this, please?
I think it's imperative that we have support not only for the BAME communities, but also from the BAME communities towards both the older and younger generations. I think if we want to promote a diverse culture with again, diverse opportunities, diverse innovations and cultural enrichment, we have to have their support and we have to support them. So so yeah, I think it's just, in terms of looking at the diversity of stuff, it's incredibly important.
Thank you very much. Helen, would you like to say something on this?
Yes, I would. I'm particularly interested in the intergenerational part of this question because it talks about older people and it talks about younger people. And when you do work across the age range, particularly in some of our more disadvantaged communities, actually that's where you get the stories and the learning. And I think we often forget, particularly in some communities, how important stories are between the young and the old, and that people are supported to maintain their identity and their links to their local community, particularly when it comes to emotional well-being. We often notice that one of the issues for younger people and older people is that they've started to feel that their identity with their community has been diluted. And I think that's particularly important when we're talking about mental health in some communities.
Thank you very much. I'm just wondering whether, I think it's Graham, would you like to come in on that?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, clearly, I think support of BAME or all communities, especially minority communities, is vital to promote inclusivity and to help us to build a larger one community without divisions or groups. What I find in my work is really encouraging, in that working alongside the younger generation, they're far more advanced than my generation and the older generations in achieving that. And generally speaking, I find that young people today, they don't see race, gender, sexuality, they just see the person. And that, I think, gives us tremendous hope to find a more peaceful and happy community that can live together.
Thank you very much. Shane, would you like to say something? Because I think you deal with you would be able to add a bit more on this.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I echo what everybody's just said there, and certainly what Helen was talking about, and the importance of breaking down barriers, people, sections of the community getting to know each other, working with each other, learning together. We've run in the past very successful intergenerational projects in the borough. And particularly what you also get in Kingston is obviously inequality around in terms of wealth as well. So in some of the poorer parts of the borough, mixing things up in terms of taking older people there, and vice versa, bringing kids into centres where older people are as well. And I think that matters as well across minority groups, because the more experience people get of each other, then hopefully that kind of fosters a more of an understanding across the generations and across the different backgrounds. Kingston is a very diverse borough. I've been here 20 years. It's far more diverse than it was 20 years ago. And it's a great place. It's a great place to live. But I do think that we can't take things for granted. I do think we always constantly look about how we build those connections, how we build different types of activities that reach out to other groups across the community, as well as when we do activities ourselves, any organisation, including my own, we need to really make sure that they're quite inclusive, that everybody in the borough thinks they can access them, that it's something that they can join and they can get involved in. And that's something you have to work at. It just doesn't happen, and we shouldn't take it for granted. But yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure whether, Andrew, you would like to come in at all on this. No.
That's okay. Sorry.
I just wondered whether you wanted to say a few words, or shall I continue?
No, it's probably best if you continue.
Okay.
Thank
you. I'd like to say a few words on this point. It is widely recognized that families and friends are so important at the moment, as is having a peer or buddy network. Whether you are from a BAME community or not, it is about reaching out and finding support from one another. I am aware there is a compassionate communities work being done by Southwest London Clinical Commissioning Group to look at individuals who have struggled with isolation and about building community connections, and the actual objective is how can compassionate communities help with the care provision for people affected by ill health and death and bereavement. So I just thought I'll add that in there. The other part of this question was, how can community organizations best work in partnership with local authorities to support older and younger local residents? Can you provide an example of how this is being achieved? I think Helen would be the person who should come in on this.
Thank you, and I hope my sound quality is a little better now. I know it wasn't great. So 2 things on this one. One of the examples of why it's so important to work together with local with community groups, and a really good example has been some of the work done on test and trace at Test and Track, and some of the engagement and communication work local community groups. I have no doubt whatsoever, if it hadn't been for some of the small community groups working really closely with RBK over the last few months, there would have been more people infected with COVID. And it has been absolutely phenomenal, whether that's been about translation, whether that's been about audio, whether it's been about making sure that social media campaigns have really reached into local groups. So that's a really good example, I think, of why it's important. Who knew we were going to have a pandemic? But one of the things I think that I would say to particularly community groups and how best to work, I think there are 3 things. I think be very generous with feedback, particularly into organisations such as councils who are commissioning services. So giving feedback, constantly giving insight about what will meet people's needs, and the best way to do that is really, really important. I think the second thing is particularly being generous in terms of informing what might need to happen in the future, because the reality is that the world is changing very, very rapidly, and making sure that you understand what's happening in a local community and what might be coming ahead is really, really important. And then the third thing is helping people like me when we get it wrong, because we will, learn going forward on how to get it right. And sometimes that's very hard for community groups because they're already working in the voluntary sector. They're often volunteers, so you're asking them to do a little bit more, but that's the sign of true partnership. And I know it's a big ask, but that would be to the 3 things that I think would be really important.
Thank you very much. Does anyone else want to add to this in the panel? No? Okay, I would like to add something on this.
I'm happy to.
Sorry, yes, please do.
I was just going to add a sort of perspective from the university side, so a slightly different take on it. But in terms of how we look to support local community organisations and at the same time create opportunities for our students. So this year we're funding in the region of 50 to 70 sort of micro consultancy projects for our students to work. We effectively pay our students to work up to 55 hours on projects which tackle issues of racial equality, social justice, sort of local regeneration and sustainability. And so it's an important contribution that the university and our students are making to supporting this important community work that goes on locally. We have a second round of that funding, which is coming up in January. So that's something we'd be very keen to support local organisations in doing, and using the strengths, the immense strengths and insights that our students have to support that important work.
Thank you very much. That's very good to know. Anyone else would like to chip in? No, all right. I have looked at this myself, and in Kingston, the BAME Mental Health Partnership works very closely in partnership with iCope, which is an online counseling service for young people. And I know that the voluntary sector is playing a huge role in providing support for the older and younger generations. There are a number of voluntary organizations like the Tamil Elders Group. We also have MILAP, and we have many other organizations. There are the Test and Trace has helped both communities so far, including sessions for people with long-term conditions. This way of working is aiming to tackle inequalities experienced particularly in those having mental health issues, and is also about increasing awareness and building resilience amongst the BAME community. So unless anyone else has anything to add, I will go on to the questions that we received regarding the younger people. The first question that we received was, what are the main challenges that younger BAME residents face? Maybe I can ask Ali if you could start with that, because obviously, you know, at the university you do see a lot of this that's going on.
I can certainly give a perspective around what some of the challenges that our students are facing at the moment, and obviously many of them are from the local community or from the sort of wider south and southwest London area. I think they have a number of concerns. Obviously, one of them, the sort of most paramount at the moment, is financial concerns. Many of them are returning to university this year. They'll have lost some of their part-time work. They'll have family members who've lost their jobs as a result of the economic impact of the pandemic. And that creates its own sort of mental health challenges. And so both there are sort of wider health challenges, obviously, in the impact on BAME communities as a whole, but also a sort of a real mental health challenge among young people, which particularly impacts on those who are sort of most financially impacted as well. So it's a sort of catalogue of challenges, and then a real concern about their futures. And I'm sure Hamad will have a sort of personal perspective on this, but there's a lot of very negative sort of media narrative at the moment about the, you know, opportunities for young people and sort of what the current economic crisis means for their futures. And there are still opportunities out there, and it's very much important for us to sort of communicate a message of hope, as well as obviously working to ensure that there are opportunities there. So there's a whole range of issues, and then obviously, you know, we've also seen the impact of the Black Lives Matter movement and the way that I think that it's re-energized people to do more. We've seen a real passion from our students in wanting to take action and to make a difference. So those are some of the things that have come through from our discussions with students.
Thank you very much. Sergeant White, I think you work a lot with the younger children in school, so maybe you could add something to this for us.
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. I'd really like to know the answer to it myself. And we're doing a lot of work in the schools to try and dig into that. This term, we've tried to set up independent advisory groups within our schools in Kingston, and we've had meetings with students at Holy Cross School, Chessington School and the Kingston Academy, and we're hoping to get more to try and find out what their challenges are. Obviously it's publicised that disproportionate number of BAME people are subjected to stop and search by the police. So that's something that we'd like to look at in Kingston, and how it affects the young people in our schools. I don't know if it's a main challenge, but it's certainly one of the ones that I'm looking at. So maybe if we come back in 6 months' time, I'll be able to give you a more direct answer, but it is something that we're looking at, and hopefully we can give some help in their challenges.
Thank you very much. Hamid, with Mr. Malik, would you be able to say a few words?
Yeah, definitely. I think sort of looking at it from my perspective, obviously younger Black, Asian, minority ethnic students disproportionately come from disadvantaged backgrounds, and this tends to create a real issue with the level of support they're getting for key exams and and university applications and that kind of thing. So that's something that needs to be sort of actively looked at and I think challenged more in our education system. And whilst that having been said, I think even within schools, peers and students do feel at times that there's some racism or there's discrimination, and especially where there's unconscious racial bias. And so I think schools in particular need to look at more robust service systems of trying to root that out, as it were. And I think sort of more generally, with the wider racial tensions that we sort of have across the community, that starts to build this narrative of, well, like we have to, look after ourselves. And I know students, myself included, looking at sort of, well, what kind of university do I want to apply to? Is the area particularly, is the area particularly racist, or is it particularly accepting? Sort of, I think it's just sort of these more sort of broader ideas is what I wanted to just quickly hint at.
Thank you very much. I wonder whether anyone else would like to come into that to say a few words, either Helen or Shane, whether you have anything to add to this.
I mean, I think it's quite difficult with when people talk about younger adults, because I'm never quite sure whether I'm meant to be talking about sort of teenagers, but actually people slightly, the older you get a bit confused about who's younger. I do think that there is something we need to recognise, particularly around mental health, and particularly around also learning disability and people with who have learning needs, because there is undoubtedly, particularly over the last few months, all of the inequalities that were there have now been enhanced. People are struggling more, and I think particularly the mental health of young people is a real worry. And I do think that we don't really understand the full depth of that. And of course, particularly from those from Black, Asian and minority communities, they already struggle quite significantly around access to prevention in terms of mental health. They are more likely to end up in more significant treatments within mental health services. So I think part of this conversation tonight is actually starting to help us reflect on, so what do we really have the resources? Are we doing enough thinking about those people who have now, and particularly young people, how are they really experiencing life emotionally at the moment, and how are we ready and agile enough with a response to that, particularly for young Black men? I think is a big worry for me, Graham, in terms of what that might mean over the next 12 to 18 months.
Thank you. Shane, do you have anything to add to this?
I would only just to echo what some of the people were saying earlier, really, about disadvantaged backgrounds, which is a very real thing in terms of for young people. In terms of, I mean, we would all have to say at the moment it's pretty rubbish for young people across the piece with COVID and looking at their futures, which obviously look quite bleak in many ways. And I think in addressing that across the generations and about looking at as a society as a whole, how do we identify where the issues are most acute and what we can do about them, really? And I think Helen's quite right to point out one of the things that COVID has done is really highlight where the issues are. And I think the data, the information we have is there for everyone to see. So really, it's up to all of us who work and live here and who provide services to do something about that over the next next 2 years or so.
Thank you. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And all of you are what you've brought in. The BMA people do experience cultural hurdles. with access to health services, racism and discrimination, perhaps schools amongst their peer group or in work environments, social and economic inequalities there are, and also mental health stigmas. They are afraid in case there's a stigma. And these are all the things that affect the young person's self-esteem and ability to progress. So we need to tackle that. And it is important that young people can have a voice, be confident, as Ali and Hamid was saying, and being heard. And that's what the problem is. And they must be listened. So, you know, this is something that we have to take away very, very seriously. And I think you all agree, and I think everyone's coming to that same point. I'll go on to the next question. What do young people need to do to get their voices heard? I'll come to Graham. Sergeant White, please.
Thank you. Personally, I think young people's voices are being heard louder than ever. Thanks to that must go to the BLM movement, when young people particularly made a stand and spoke out to such an extent that we saw a real shift change in young people being recognised, and that's a huge improvement and a benefit that is great for everyone, because they've got a lot to say, and they're the future, and they're key to the success of our community. So they are being heard. I think what they must do is continue to make their voices heard. Excuse me, with the Black Lives Matter movement, with Extinction Rebellion. These were both largely run by young people and carried forward by young people, and I think that's a great success and great credit to them for that. So I think they need to have confidence that they'll be listened to, and certainly within schools and colleges and the university, they promote young people's voices, and they mustn't be afraid to speak up. I think what we need to do is help to teach them how to speak up and how to express themselves in a way that people will take notice, and just by engaging with them and sitting down and listening to them and speaking with them, I think that's how we can really benefit them and help them to further increase the volume that they're being heard at.
Sorry, I was on mute. Hamid, as you're on the Youth Parliament, you should be able to give us a bit more insight into this and how you feel.
Yeah, definitely. I think that we have some fantastic youth voice vehicles right now, especially with the Kingston Richmond Youth Council and the UK Youth Parliament in general. And I think it's very, very important that the council and schools sort of engage more with us. And I think now that young people are becoming more and more vocal, it befalls more on the official sort of institutions in our councils, etc., to try and build closer links with the Kingston Richmond Youth Council, with school councils, with schools, and to help us facilitate a system whereby we can have an official system where we can feedback and talk and discuss and contribute to important and proper decisions. Because right now what we have is sort of these national movements where young people go out protest, and it seems like their voices are being heard. But I think if we are to look at this more genuinely and try to create a more systematic positive change, we need to look at how we can officially integrate youth voices into our decision-making processes.
Thank you very much. Ali, would you be able to add in something as how is it happening in the university and how students are managing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the first thing I'll say is I agree with the points that both Hamad and Graham have made. In terms of you know, the response from young people to the Black Lives Matter movement, I think was the primary reason why it gained so much momentum, is that they refused to be quiet and they refused to let it go. And I think that's the vitally important thing, is that they continue to do that and continue to participate and engage, and not to be not to allow the matter to be silenced or to be shut down. Within the university, it's and it's an easy thing to say, but student partnership is at the heart of everything we do. So we're always very keen to involve students in our all of our key programs. Within my team, we have we employ students to work alongside the careers staff, so that our activities, our programs, are very much co-created by students. But sort of more widely across the university, we've taken the opportunity in the light of the Black Lives Matter movement to look at how we ensure specifically for our students from Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups that they do have a voice. And we've started with a series of listening events. We've been working with the Students' Union very closely to ensure that we provide a voice and we provide a platform for students. And then critically, that we hear, we listen to what they're saying, and that we make changes as a result of that. So it's very much ongoing work as far as the university is concerned. We've certainly, I think, there's more dialogue than there ever has been, and there are more opportunities for students to feed in. We need to continue to evolve that and to create and to ensure those platforms are there as we move forward.
Okay, thank you. I think, I don't know whether you're aware of the Trailblazer for Mental Health Ambassador Program. And that's how BAME young people are forming buddy networks in schools with their peers, organizing events, seminars in schools with their parents to raise awareness of mental health. So there are programs like that. And you know, these came before the Children's and Adults Care and Education Committee in 2019 too. So hopefully you would take a look at, you know, all of you will take a look at the case agenda pack. And in there, one of the councillors had written a report on it. So possibly you might want to look at it. It's 2019. I'm just wondering whether we should just go, I'll pass on to, there are quite a number of other questions, but I'll pass it on to my co-chair, Andrew Besson, so he can take a few questions relating to older people, and then I'll come back to the younger people's questions again. Over to you, Andrew.
Okay, thanks so much, Lucilla. Just actually finishing off on that last question, it was interesting hearing what, you know, about the Youth Parliament and the work going on in the university. The other way, of course, and this sort of goes back to my previous role a couple of years ago, the other way that young people can get their voices heard is obviously through the democratic process. And there has for quite a long time, and still the case, sort of quite a gap in terms of the proportion of young people who are registered on, or not registered on the register of electors. And then indeed people who are registered who don't necessarily vote. So I think that's quite an important way of getting your voice heard. So anyway, moving on to the topic around older people. So there's 5 or 6 questions here, which obviously we'll see how far we get into this. The very first question, I think I have to be careful who I ask this to. What, in your opinion, does good ageing look like in Kingston? Shane, would you like to start on this?
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, my view of what good ageing looks like in Kingston is that it's one that is where people who are getting older, of whatever different background they come from, it's a hopefully a very inclusive existence. It's an existence where people have choice, where people feel safe, there's inclusion, and people can access fair access and equal access to a whole range of things that are available in Kingston. I think that's what good ageing looks like. I'll elaborate that a bit later with some of the other questions, but I think that's basically it for me.
Okay, thank you. Helen, do you want to add to that at all?
Yes, I think I'd agree with all those sentiments that Shane has just expressed. I'd just like to add a couple of bits to that. So I think it's really important as you get older that you have somewhere to live that you can call home, and that's recognised as your home, and a care home or your own, they're all homes. So I think that's really important. I think the older you get, the more connecting with family and friends is incredibly important, and we know that from a lot of the feedback, and we know that it's incredibly important for people to also feel connected to faith communities that feed their spiritual well-being as well. Good aging, I think, looks like feeling valued, feeling that you're not a problem. You're not just a pair of wrinkly hands. You're not just an adult social care revenue budget burden, that you're actually contributing to the community around you in all sorts of different ways. I think it's incredibly important for good aging that dignity and respect allows you to make decisions. And then one of the things that we don't probably talk about enough, good aging means that you can die well. And that as you enter into that ending of your life, it's as well and as good as it possibly can be, and being able to have conversations about how great your life has been and how your life can be as you enter the final phase.
Okay, thank you very much. Graham, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, it's not my area of expertise, but as an older resident of Kingston, I can give a perspective, but this is my view. I think we need to, as a community, support the older generation by allowing them to maintain their independence for as long as they want it, and to support them to live a sort of as full a life as possible. And I'd like to point out that what I've seen during the pandemic is the local authority has actually given some really good support to the more vulnerable people in the community from COVID, with a lot of contact by different formats, email, phone, letter, and just offering support if it's there, if they need it. And I think we should encourage older generation to take that support if it can help them. But yeah, that is my view.
Okay, Hamad, do you want to add anything?
I think, well, I mean, I'm not exactly old, but I think it's very important that we get the older generation to also really engage with the young people, because their experiences, their skills, etc., are going to be so very valuable to the younger generations, and I think it'd be a really rewarding experience for them too. So, I'm taking a very liberal view of good aging, but I think good aging is really when not only is our population healthy, but it's also very well engaged with what's happening in the community, and especially with helping us young people develop into better young people.
Okay, thank you. Ali, anything from you?
Nothing really to add to what everyone's already captured. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much. Moving on to the second question. What support does Kingston Council offer to its older BAME residents? Helen, I think I'll probably have to start with you on that one.
Yes, I will. So we offer a whole range of information and advice. We offer direct care, personal care, and support in people's homes and in care homes. and we offer a whole range of things that go from people being discharged from hospital to people who need support in their own homes. One of the things people often don't realise about adult social care as well is that, and particularly within the council, is that we have to do a Care Act assessment. So we support people formally following something called an assessment about eligible need. And sometimes that can mean that for some people, they don't receive support from adult social care. They'll be expected to fund their own care. So in terms of particularly then thinking about, so what does that mean for Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups? Then what it starts to mean is that we also commission and work with lots of voluntary sector organisations and community groups. And there's a whole range that we work with, whether it's about working with lunch clubs, whether it's working with social activities, whether it's working and supporting those community groups to meet the needs of local groups. So of particular communities. So for instance, the South Koreans, senior citizens, and other small groups. So we do that specific work. But then I just want to touch on something else in terms of how Kingston Council is trying to really improve what it does, particularly with some of the smaller groups. So around 14% of the people that we work with are from, and that's anybody from the age of 18 all the way up to older people, are from a Black, Asian or minority ethnic group. And that means that it's really, really important that we've got a workforce that understands those people's needs, because without that, what we'll do is we'll just treat everybody in the same way. And the other interesting thing is that 67% of the adult social care workforce in London is from a Black, Asian and minority ethnic background. So we are doing an awful lot at the moment to really focus on how do we improve our social work practice and how do we make sure we've got a workforce that can really engage, particularly with some of our smaller groups. And that's not just about language, but that's also understanding people's cultural needs and making sure that we're really shining a light on understanding the individual, their cultural and their community background, and then how do we support them, their family and carers to work with them.
Okay, thank you very much. That's a very comprehensive answer. It's probably primarily Helen who can answer this question, but does any other panel members want to chip in?
Andrew, can I add something on
sure.
this, please? There are a number of community resources, like Connected Kingston's there's a website via the Kingston Voluntary Action. There's also Kingston Mental Health Carers Forum, and they provide very fantastic support and network for anyone who is either a carer, who needs advice, or who needs signposting for further support and services. So those would be very useful for our older residents. I just thought I'll add into that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So moving on to the third question. There's been a very high level of deaths recorded of people from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities during the current pandemic. What is being done to ensure older people and their families within the AME communities remain safe from COVID-19? Helen, I'll probably start with you again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so actually one of the things I should have added to the earlier bit is the other thing that's really important is that we measure exactly what the impact of our services are. And for instance, during COVID-19, we have been tracking and measuring the impact on particular communities of COVID-19. And whilst other parts of the country have seen quite significant numbers in terms of the Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, ours hasn't tracked in quite the same way. Now, When I talked earlier about some of the work that's been done in terms of translation, in terms of making sure people understood how to manage infection, did people understand how to access things like PPE, did people understand about social distancing, all of those sorts of things. I am really, really clear that if some of that work hadn't been done, that the impact would have been different, and we have seen that in different parts of the country. So that's the first thing I want to say. In terms of, so it's important that we measure, and we are continuing to measure the impact. And as we go forward, for example, as we start to think about mass vaccination, we again will make sure that we're translating all information, that we're using community groups to get that information out, that we're recruiting volunteers and supporting those volunteers from different communities, and that we're particularly also working with faith groups, established voluntary sector organisations. We are not the experts sometimes in how we engage with people, so we're very much focusing on that. The other thing I think is about collecting feedback and active listening. So we talked a little bit earlier about people's voices and people's voices being heard, but also there's not much point people telling us lots of things if we don't do something about it. And I can give just a couple of practical examples about, at the moment, we're buying some additional capacity, and we are buying some of that additional capacity in the community. And we've had a few hiccups, but I think we're getting there. And we are really going to those groups that we think potentially might be most at risk over the next few months for all sorts of reasons, from social isolation, all of those sorts of things. Rather than us saying how it's going to be done, we've listened very hard to what people have said they think is needed, and we're asking those organisations to provide it in the best way that they know how. So we're trying to take ourselves out being the expert.
Okay, thank you very much. Very comprehensive. Shane, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, just to follow on, I mean, I agree with what Helen said there. I think we're obviously in a very unreal situation at the moment, a situation none of us expected or were really prepared for in terms of being under COVID-19. It affects all older people in terms of restrictions, in terms of accessing services. A lot of places are not accessible at the moment. They're closed because of the rules. You know, we're in lockdown at the moment as well, and that really hinders being able to work with older people, full stop. But when you look at different groups within our community, you know, we know for a fact that people from minority groups are even more affected by the situation. Things are more exacerbated because COVID has reinforced isolation, it's reinforced loneliness. These are the kind of things normally, you know, are epidemic in themselves, and we should be working to do something about. But COVID skews all that, and in terms of what we can do, because the very nature of dealing with a virus is that we have to protect ourselves from each other in many ways. But what has been really good in Kingston is that there's been a great community response. The council have given a lead in lots of different areas. It shows the community and the council working together. I think Helen's right when she says, you know, the council doesn't have all the solutions, and it needs to work more in partnership than it is with the community, the wider bits of the community. But there are groups out there. I mean, Millap's one group that does really important work. They've got Tamil elders groups that does good work. There are other groups within the communities and within neighbourhoods supporting different sections of our community. I think we're finding out an awful lot more than we did before. I think we need to, as a result of what we've learnt from going through this experience over the last 8 months or so, is what will be obviously criminal if we ignore all the evidence that's come out of that. But I feel as though, you know, the council is saying there's a real commitment to make inroads, to look at those inequalities, and actually how do we ensure that we stay, you know, the Kingston stays fairer and is more of an equal borough. And when it comes to older people's services, it's really, you know, we need to do more around prevention and working with different groups, the groups I mentioned before, making sure they've got the right level of support needed to do the things they need to do. Again, you know, we were dealing with COVID after 10 years of austerity. Local authorities are really strapped for cash. There's not an awful lot of money around. So what money there is, has to go a lot further. And I think the way we do that is obviously sharing and looking at the priorities and focusing on those as well, and listening to what people have experienced. I think overall COVID hasn't had the impact in this part of the world as it has in some parts of the country, which is really good. And I think all that's partly is because of the way the community has responded, which is also really, really good. And I think there's links and there's connections that have been strengthened from the COVID period, and I think we can really build upon that as well.
Okay, anyone else?
Yeah, Andrew.
Yes, sorry. Yeah.
Quick. I'll be really brief.
Yeah.
Just from police point of view, best way to protect yourself is obviously follow the government guidance. If you're able to, go out and get some exercise and some fresh air, but be aware of your social distancing. Wear a mask where you should wear a mask. And we have got extra police patrols who have been out on the streets since the start of the pandemic and the first lockdown, just to answer calls in relation to COVID. So there is some support out there, but just a reminder to everyone to follow the guidance, and the closer we follow it, then the sooner we'll be out of this. But I would like to echo what Shane's just said, that I think what I've seen is that by the large, the people of Kingston have been really, really good at following that guidance, and just continue to do that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. Time is moving on. There were 6 of these older people's questions. I'm going to ask just one more, and then I think we'll have time to go back to the younger people's questions, as these have all been very much older person focused, haven't they? So just maybe briefly, what is being done to address the discrimination suffered by older people when services are provided to wider communities? Again, Helen, I think probably I should start with you.
Yeah, so I'll have a little rest in a minute when the rest of the questions come up. So first of all, I think one of the things is to recognise the importance of the staff and how they behave. And I think it's also in order to address discrimination, it's recognising how white staff behave, people like me. And actually starting to make sure that we are really clear about our practice and what that means. So I think what the council has been particularly good, and I think this is partly Ian's leadership, but it's really about particularly trying to recognise that we do treat people from different backgrounds with greater respect. It's not just good enough to say respect, we go that one step further. I think that it's absolutely important, particularly with our workforce, our co-workers, and if you think 67% of adult social care staff in London are from different backgrounds, that they feel like we treat them with respect and that they're working in an environment of inclusion that is improving. Are we going back and saying to them, does this feel better over the last few months? There's also something about addressing discrimination and making sure that the workforce researches and understands the impact of discrimination on people, and particularly around older people. And there's a really important piece here about mental health. We know the mental health of all of the population has suffered, and particularly for older people, and particularly around dementia and some of the issues that they've experienced, and we shouldn't underestimate that. And the fact that if you're from a Black, Asian and minority background, you are more likely to end up in hospital, and you are more likely to be treated with medication that will be very significant. I think there is also something about encouraging people to intervene when they see discrimination. What is our level of tolerance? Are we happy that it's not good enough? And then I think is really championing that sort of equality and positivity and inclusion. So I just want to, I know you've been very pressed about, you know, the questions, but I know one of the questions tonight was about the failure probably and the delays about getting MILAP into its new centre. And I think from an organisational perspective, we've got a number of voluntary sector organisations that for all sorts of reasons we probably haven't done as a good a job as we could over the last few over the last year or so. And it's actually saying, understanding the impact of some of those delays on specific communities that perhaps have already suffering significant disadvantage. So that was a long-winded way of saying I could talk about lots of things around addressing discrimination, but the starting point as an organisation has to start with the actions of some of your staff, and particularly thinking about white staff. And as social workers, we have got the best job ever. I could recommend it as a career to anybody, particularly the young people that are listening to this. But actually, as social workers, our job is promoting social justice, and it's really, really important that we practice and role model tackling discrimination. So I could go on a bit of a rant, but I won't. So I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other panel members want to say anything briefly on this? No? Oh, Shane. Yeah.
Yeah, just to you know, point out what Helen was said there is right. I think what it's important about what you want to be doing is organisations need to be running services that really genuinely reflect the community they're there to serve, and you should be able to see that within those organisations. Well, I don't think that necessarily just happens. I think you have to work at that. We have to make special measures to ensure that people feel inclusive, that they feel as though they can access all what's available and what they can get. I remember when I started working in this borough some decades ago now, and coming across a day service, and for example, that was very much dominated by just older women who all looked the very same and all looked the same type, and they couldn't understand in that instance why there wasn't any men going there. And so the only way we dealt with that is actually we proactively made it more of a male-friendly environment in terms of bringing in the pool table and things such as that. But it takes time to do stuff and to make a difference and to address that. At that time was a huge gender imbalance. But I think where organisations take proaction and be proactive about things, I think that can have an impact and make a difference in things. Because we share a joint challenge about resource going forward and the lack of it. And therefore, how do we make the most of what we've already got? And I think, you know, Kingston's got an awful lot going for it. I think it's very creative. I think it can be very innovative, and you know, it's not the biggest borough in London. It's a small borough. It does have, as a percentage, it does have as a lot of older people, and the future is old. There's more older people than ever before, and we have to do things differently. Otherwise, we have a real problem coming down the line. But I think there's a will to do that, and where there's a will, there's a way.
Great, thanks very much. Okay, so Sheila, we'll move back to you for if we can fit in a couple of the younger people questions.
Thank you very much, Andrew. The question I'm going to take at this, because we are running out of time, would be young people's resources such as youth centres are the first areas subjected to cuts when local authorities have to save money. What can we expect? What should our brigade do to address the needs of young people in the borough? I think this goes straight to Helen. If you'd like to come in on that, please. Thank you. Helen, you're on mute. Helen, you're on mute. Can you unmute?
Sorry. I wasn't expecting that question to come straight to me.
Oh, sorry.
So apologies. So I suppose the first bit of that in terms of RBK's bit is about really listening to the voices that are saying that it is important for them to have something to do, and particularly to be able to give a view on how best what are a finite amount of resources to be used. And that's why things like the Youth Parliament is so important. I suppose the other bit of all of this is really thinking about what are the opportunities with local communities. We all know that there is only a finite amount of resource, and we always tend to think about resource about being pounds, and whether we think there are actually other assets that we should be using to keep things. If it is youth centres that young people think are really valuable, what things do they think that we can use in terms of resources to provide what they need? So it's very much about working in partnership. And then the last point to make is just particularly making sure that young people do get involved in democracy. I think is a point Andrew made earlier, which is very, very important.
I'll just ask Hamed whether you'd like to come in. Very quick, short answer, please. I'd be most grateful.
Okay. Look, we've already talked about how we're going to increase youth voices, how we're going to challenge youth mental health, how we're going to do, how we're going to engage people in democracy. A lot of the answers to that can be found in youth centres. I think we can, in youth centres, we can create a place, sort of a nature, or a nature essentially even, where we can create sort of this environment where young people are incredibly open and expressive. Now, of course, we don't have unlimited money. I get that, and the council has to have made cuts. So perhaps we should look at schools already that we have and look at their facilities and try to utilise them and look at the assets we have. And I think what we need is a thorough review into what we can use, because youth centres will be pivotal, I think, to any conversations we're going to have with young people.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As we are running out of time, I think we are going to go on to wrap this whole thing up. And I will pass this on to Andrew, the co-chair, to deal with certain points, and then I will take on from there. Andrew, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. So I think we've had a pretty interesting discussion, fairly wide-ranging. Sort of interesting having older and younger topics mixed together, although it, as we found in relation to the older person's topic, it sort of slightly limits the contributions. But I think it's certainly been interesting. I think I started making notes of sort of key points, and certainly a lot of the things that Helen was saying were particularly interesting. Some of the factors that I picked up from particularly the earlier parts of the discussion was obviously the importance of promoting community cohesion, people working together, mixing older and younger communities together, the important role of community groups. It was interesting to hear the work that the university is doing to support the younger residents, and the importance of obviously engaging younger people in lots of different ways, including the wider democratic process, which I'm very keen on. We also heard some of the steps that the council has been taking. Obviously, the sort of the tracking of the spread of the pandemic amongst the different groups, sort of interesting. And also hearing that I think you said 67% of adult social care workers in London are from the black and minority ethnic community. That's an interesting statistic. So overall, I think, a useful discussion, various things that we can take away from that. What I also need to do is sort of emphasise that the discussion we've had clearly isn't the end of this. This is just, maybe just the beginning, I suppose, or the end of the beginning. what we want to do, of course, is encourage people to share their views through both the council and CREC's social media, and also need to be promoting the next event, which is happening on, I think it is the 10th of December, which is looking at gender and disability, which will also start at 6:30 p.m. on YouTube. So Sheila, I think we still have a bit of time, so I'll hand back to you, and you can sum up from your perspective.
Yes, thank you very much. I think we have, there are a number of projects, like Helen was saying, in relation to youth clubs, etc. There are quite a number of, the Hook Centre in Chessington hosted the youth services. There is the youth cluster lead. There are quite a number of matters, and also where mental health is concerned. So I think there are some questions on the YouTube, and I can't see the questions. I wondered, Andrew, whether you can see it, or would John be able to come in on that?
Yeah, sorry. There were a couple of questions that had come in. One was, families who originate from rural communities, especially from abroad, face a huge challenge with intergenerational issues such as networking and support for older people. Is there anything RBK is or should be doing to support these people?
I suppose we'll have to go to Helen on that to see what she would say. Short and sweet, please. Thank you.
So the simple answer is yes. We are looking at particularly how we use things like, I think it's called Leah here, the Learn English, those sorts of routes to actually start to connect to people and say what would be useful in terms of connecting, because there's some really small groups, and see what would work in terms of connecting them and what support, information, advice. And I think it's also really important around refugees and talking to faith communities. So the answer is yes, we should be doing more. And we are trying to, and particularly we actually had a conversation this morning about how we do that.
Thank you very much. I don't know whether anyone else wants to add anything, because really it relates to what the council's doing. Andrew, do you think you can see whether there are any other questions, please?
The second question that I can see here quite possibly came from the same person, because it says, could we add the letter R to BAME to include refugees? Is it appropriate to include this additional category of people within the established group? Question mark.
I really don't know whether we can answer that question at the moment. What do you say, Andrew?
Well, it might be interesting to see if any panel members...
Some thought on it. Maybe the panel members,
yeah.
Anyone in the panel?
So I'm quite happy to say that whether it's got an R on the end of it, particularly refugees are absolutely on our radar in terms of making sure that we are reaching out to them, particularly in the current pandemic, where we know they will be feeling even more fragile.
Thank you very much. I understand Kingston uses it in any event, so that would answer the questions. As there's very short of time now, Andrew, I think we can give written answers to most of the questions that we couldn't answer tonight, and also those from the YouTube. I'm sure we'll take that away and give written answers. Do you agree on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I think that's fine. We've probably still got 10 minutes though, Sushila. So I think I don't know whether there is a chance.
So is there another question, or
you might be able to?
Yes, would you want to fit in another question, please? Thank you.
I mean, it could be whichever the next question for younger people or about younger people was.
Do you want me to go on to that? Okay, I can. There was another question which came up on the younger people. I just look at that now. Hold on. During the COVID-19 pandemic, young people lost a lot of time because schools and other recreation facilities were shut. Now that there is a second lockdown, what have we learned from the earlier lockdown to help young people deal with the current situation better? Helen, would you like to come in on that, please? It relates to mental health and issues what the council are doing in schools.
So I feel spectacularly ill-equipped to talk about schools. What I can talk about is about sort of young adults and mental health, partly because I have been having a conversation about it today. We have started to really look at how access to particularly active listening and low-level emotional health and all the online availability around wellbeing is promoted in the borough, to make sure that we can use a whole range of channels so that people are aware of it. The other bit is that we really do want to make sure that we are providing services, particularly at primary care, and that particularly links to things like social prescribing, exercise, all of those pieces of work, and Shane may want to come into that we are clear how much capacity there is there. And Shane may be able to say a little bit more about the age profile around particularly the access to social prescribing. For those of you who don't know, social prescribing is very much about providing low-level wellbeing support.
Shane, would you like to come in, please?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, Kingston has a team of community connectors, also known as social prescribers, and we host that service here at Staywell. They work with GPs, and they're based in 4 different GP, what we call primary care networks across the borough. And one of the great things that they can do, they're a non-clinical, non-medical service, and they work with other groups and they make referrals to other groups as to where they're needed, and they deal with a lot of issues that come the GP's way, which isn't necessarily related to medicine or something clinical. But often mental health, obviously you can be prescribed various tablets for mental health, but a lot of the time what GPs, and they meet people, they meet young people, because the service is open to all adults, anybody over 18, and younger indeed, that they can deal with, take referrals from young people as well. Is really to really get people into preventative services, talking therapies, group work, group activities. There's a big pressure on that, obviously, because of COVID. It's affecting a lot of people's mental health. It's a real issue. We don't want to medicalise our own community, but we do need to get services going where people can get back active again. They can start feeling included. Because things like loneliness, I know this very well from working with older people, is a real issue. But it's interesting how that's now actually a community issue. It affects people of all ages, and particularly many young people as well. And obviously you're locked down. You can't really go out and about as you once would, or meet your friends as you could. Well, not legally anyway. So hopefully things will change and things will lighten up soon, as vaccines coming down the line. So things should improve. But I do think as a community, we do really need to be aware those issues haven't gone away. And we need to come together to work out what we're going to do about them. And I do think the low-level mental health service is really, really important, where essentially that's all of us supporting each other and creating forums and groups where people can access things and where they can talk to each other and where people can feel supported. I think Kingston's well capable of pulling something like that off, and I think we can alleviate an awful lot of that. As I said before, there's a lot of talent, a lot of creativity and a lot of ability in this community, and we need to harness that really. And I think that we've got examples where we've proved we've done that in the past, and most recently where we've done it via the COVID work and supporting the community. But those issues don't go away, and I think we need to work on them and actually include more people in developing those things across intergenerations, because loneliness at one end of the life scale compared to loneliness at the other end, there's learning that can be shared there. There's experiences that we can share and knowledge to be gained
Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we only got 5 minutes left. So, Andrew, shall I wind down, or do you want to say anything else?
No, I think I'd sort of done my earlier sort of summation. So if you'd like to wind up, and I'll just say something right at the end, if that's okay.
Yes, I'd like to add that, even though this forum today is on a lot on from CREC and BME, it covers actually all aspects and all people who lived in this borough. It's not only the Black and ethnic minority. So I'd like to say that whatever we are talking today is meant for every single person, whoever you are. And it is important to know that, so that we really go and come together as a unit. I just want to know whether the panelists have any closing remarks to make, or say anything, or add on to this. No? Okay. I think what I like to say is that there are lots of questions. These will be answered. We will put it in writing to those questions. I'm just going to do some closing. I would like to thank my co-chair, Andrew Besant, our panelist, Hamid Malik, Helen Coombs, Shane Brennan, Ellie Orr, and Sergeant Graham White. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank our staff at RBK to make this possible, to have these comms: Chris Treen, Kate Leyland, Paula Tribe, Gary Marson, and all the staff whose involvement has made it possible to broadcast this event. This has been possible because the councillors and the leader has brought this forward and agreed to bring this forward to council. So I'd like to thank the leader, Caroline Kerr, the equalities lead, Tim Cobbett, Councillor Thai Talon, RBK BAME lead, and I also like to thank Councillor Sharper, the chair of the Health Overview panel, and also one of our mental health champions, who's actually assisted me in a number of matters that I was able to speak about this evening relating to mental health. Last but not least, I'd like to also thank CREC, Javid Rafiq, Prabha Shetty, John Azza, and the team who all work behind this whole event to make it possible and make these events and engagements actually possible for everybody. Last but not least, I would like to thank all of you who have sent in questions and who have participated in this evening's forum. It is important that you all are there and have been able to ask questions. The topic for the next event will be disability and gender, and this will be on the 10th of December, Thursday at 6:30 p.m. and on YouTube. I do hope that all of you listening would tune in again and make it a successful one too. Andrew, I don't know whether you have anything else to add.
Well, the only thing I would add, Sushila, is to also thank you very much for your co-chairing skills in this, and hopefully everyone found this enjoyable, informative session.
I would also like to thank Chris Naden. I think we left him out on the list, so thank you, Chris. And I'd like to wish all of you all a very good night, and thank you all once again. And we hope that we can have more of these events, which is very interesting. And all the participation of the panelists and everyone else, thank you very much, and have a good night. Thank you.